The following story is an artistic work of fiction and falsehood. Only a fool would consider it as fact. Chapter 12. Awakening a Sleeping Giant. January 30th, 2007. Hey B, I was a bit busy yesterday, and 2 days in a row seems to be pushing it, so I thought I'd check in today instead. I finally got off the pot, so to speak, and called up her social worker. Now, no, I didn't discuss adoption procedures. Rather, we had a conversation about the volunteering of social time outside of work, as I've mentioned considering on here before. Though I phrased it more as a mentoring opportunity, since that's kind of the current hip way of putting it, historical use aside. Turns out that she's handled similar situations before, though not with someone that was also in a professional caretaker role with the subject before, except for a high school teacher that helped out a troubled but gifted kid once. Fortunately, that situation went well, so it left her with a somewhat open mind on similar other situations. So she said that she'd think about it, and check the guidelines for such things, and get back to me. We've established a decent relationship so far, so hopefully she'll bear that in mind and give me a chance, rather than dismissing me out of hand according to some general regulations or some such. I haven't told the head administrator of the home about it yet, since I figured I'd get the social worker's word on whether it's a go, no first, lest I create more trouble than I needed to in the first place. So I'm in for a penny, at least. Anyway, it wasn't actually too eventful at work last night, but it seems that she had another altercation on Sunday. She had been wheeled out to movie night, which she generally tries to get out of, but couldn't avoid this time, it seems. Understandable, since most of the actors in said movies are dead or dying by now, and was placed in the back row, since her eyesight, even monoscopic as it is still better than any of her fellow residents. So, there she was, as the rest of them filed in slowly, playing with her DS with her headphones on, perhaps content to do so for the rest of the evening, minding her own business. Apparently, they were showing Above and Beyond, some movie from the 50s about the pilot of the Enola Gay. Yeah, great choice there, but pretty standard fare for that crowd, all in all. Now, that didn't seem to be the problem, necessarily, but that guy I'd mentioned her getting into in that first altercation with was there, too, talking with a couple of his friends, and apparently noticing her, and sort of half senilely getting riled up due to the combination of a movie about nuked Japs and her. Being a couple of old people from the 40s racist, his friends didn't do much to calm him up, more the opposite in fact. So after a few minutes of this, with the nurses and orderlies on hand working the evening shift, and not having been there for the previous incident, or the majority of gossip about it, and thus not quite picking up on the combination of agitation and glances her way, he got up and headed towards her again. Once he got there, she finally looked up, not having noticed him approach with her headphones on and her attention on the game, as he cast a shadow over her. She tugged her headphones up and looked up at him, as he started into a rant speech about what that night's movie was about. Pearl Harbor, filthy Japs, his dead buddies, how they should have done more than just build camps, how they should have nuked the whole island, etc. It was around this time that the staff started really noticing the situation, though they missed whatever she said back to him. I asked her last night, and she said that she told him how her Japanese relatives had been living in the country since before the war started, so they were as American as he was. But it seemed to push a button, and he snatched her DS stylus out of her hand, and shouted something else about Tojo while making a violent gesture her way. And she threw the opened apple juice container sitting on the table beside her, on her left natch, right up into his face. Amazing shot, really, for someone with her depth perception problems. Well, that's when all hell started breaking loose, of course, and as soon as he'd recovered somewhat, he made to lunge at her, and got intercepted by the orderlies. He got escorted out, screaming about her being a slanty-eye whore, among other things, and the rest of the residents were somewhat stirred up themselves by all the excitement, most of the staff having their hands full trying to calm them up again. It was decided that it'd be for the best to wheel her back to her room rather than let her stay for the movie, which she was just fine with one of the orderlies returning her stylus to her in the hallway on the way back, having already gotten him to the room, his partner working on calming him up. I thought it was hilarious when I heard about it in the staff room on Monday night before my shift. I generally go in a bit early to catch up on what I missed the day before. Threat to her safety aside, but it also dawned on me that it probably didn't get perceived entirely as one-sided with others as it did with me, particularly with her trouble relating with the staff in the past. Still, they do get that she's just a child, and he was, theoretically, the adult, though with the problems of diminished capacity in so many of our residents, assigning responsibility for anything is always a tricky subject in the interaction. There's been a more stringent note placed in both their files about trying to keep some distance between them in the future, so hopefully that'll be the end of it. Though her ownage of him has been a source of warm fuzzy feelings in me for a while now, as disrespectful of the greatest generation it might be. Well. I met up with her when I went on shift and we discussed it amongst ourselves, with her perspective being added to the third-party observations, both of them merged in my account here, where she admitted that she really didn't mind missing the movie after all, since they're always so boring to her. Then she offered me an origami race car, and we played Mario Kart for a while, she direction pads, I button, before she went to sleep. I did my usual thing with the other patients a few times, then got a call from her again around 4, after she'd had another nightmare. And after I helped console her and calm her up enough to fall asleep again, things were quiet. Though I did feel more irritated with him, her opponent, as it seems she'd had a nightmare on Sunday night too, which I wasn't there for. The stress of the incident perhaps feeling the flames. I just hope it'll wear off soon. Well, that's about it, I suppose. Oh yeah, a question. I just realized today that 4chan has a papercraft/origami area, but when I checked it out earlier today, the first few pages were just papercraft. Is there any origami in there at all? I never had a reason to check it out before, thus my not really realizing it exists. I don't check out food or weapons either, so cut me some slack. So I just gotten to think about some new shapes I could find for her to try, as she's gone through the book I got her, and most of the other books I've seen in stores just have more or less the same basic ones. Wow, she's getting bolder and bolder. Nice reaction there. Any 7-year-old would rather back out rather than make a direct contact or retaliate with juice projectile. Way to go. As for the DS, one question, Nurse-kun. How does she play one? Stylus Plus uses one hand to push button/cross at the same time while pressing the whole DS to her lap, or some other technique? I'm curious. Yeah, I was proud of her, but it is an unusual reaction for a kid to have. But if you think about it, well, where could she go? She can't wheel her chair around herself with just the one arm, and her insistence of hating them and stubborn refusal to learn to use it precluding them getting her an electric one, it seems. So she can't retreat like a normal child would, and her issues with authority figures and distance from most of the nurses seems to leave her unwilling or unable to go to them for help. Well, it's not a normal reaction, like I said, and if you wanted to be harsh about it, you could write it off as another symptom of her PTSD, the increased aggression with stress in particular. Still, I'm trying to hang on to my abuse the elderly feeling here. As for the DS, she's still with just playing stylus control-based games. She uses her left hand to use the stylus, and her myoelectric right prosthetic arm/hand to hold it steady. She's gotten much better at doing both since before Christmas, though she's still learning to do both naturally, of course, particularly as she was right-handed before the accident. Well, I must admit that this guy has a lot of memories to back up his hate. Along with Alzheimer's, such things surface and accumulate to abnormal levels, so he can snap and will probably snap again. Please keep her out of his reach for a while. Also, please do talk to her about the incident and hear how she saw it and comment your way of seeing it. It'll help her get the tension out. Less tension equals less nightmares. Well, yeah, I can understand his inclinations toward anti-Japanese sentiment, as it was pretty universal among people his age during wartime back then, and pretty universally accepted as proper, too. So I'm cutting him more slack than I would, say, a neo-Nazi or a KKK member or something. Lol, B, gross, shoop-da-whoop, etc. Still, she's a 7-year-old child who isn't even fully Japanese. Not that that should really matter at all. Moderate dementia or no, I can't just write it off entirely. Though I'm not going to be poisoning or roughing him up either, because A, that's the opposite of my job, and why I got into this job in the first place, and B, he wouldn't even understand why it was happening in the first place, so it'd be pointless. I've been trying not to think about it too much, since it pisses me off to do so. Good feelings about her kicking ass aside.
From my somewhat limited knowledge, there's rarely any origami posted there at all. Those folks just love the paper craft. On that note, though, have you considered introducing a few other crafts to her? She sounds like a bright little kid, so I'm sure she'd appreciate different challenges.
I've thought about it, but I'm not a very craft-oriented person. I mean, I'd never even been in a hobby store before I bought that origami paper for her. It's just never been my thing. And I was just lucky a store at the local mall had it, rather than going across town for it. Any suggestions there, B? Bear in mind, her lack of depth perception combined with her one-handedness makes a lot of manual dexterity requiring projects difficult for her. And it takes her a while even with the origami to figure out the more complex 3D folds, holding it right up close and turning it this way and that before getting a handle on it. Have you considered buying her one of those GBA SD card carts and loading up some movies for her? You could discuss the movies. Pro tip, avoid amputation films like Kill Bill. I never really checked them out before, as I haven't ever really needed to use my DS for such things. What's their capabilities and general costs? Also, thanks for the pro tip. Saved me from an embarrassing presentation of Blade.
I thought similar. Her reaction is somewhat in the PTSD area, stressors of the situation still perceived as not strong enough to tackle the typical behavior. Actually, the nightmares might be a way for her to regain and reduce the more balanced scale. As cruel as it sounds, the increased frequency might be a healing sign. Poor little girl. As for the DS, that's fabulous that she's finally interacting with an object through prosthetic. She's making such progress.
Well, I'm not a PTSD specialist by any means, though I've been reading up on it and discussing it with our resident shrink since mid-December or so now. I can only do my clumsy best to try and avoid doing unintentionally hurtful things, try to do helpful ones, and hope for the best. And yeah, the first night when I offered the use of my DS, she was really frustrated by her inability to hold it steady with her prosthetic as much as her still clumsiness with her left hand on the stylus. She's gotten a lot better with both since then, and even her hand rehab nurse sent along a note saying it was a good idea, as she told her about it. It's nice to have a good idea every now and then.
I love Nurse-kun. I almost hope this is all true, just to know there's someone out there like this. Nurse-kun, what's the chance of getting a pic of the girl? I have to know if this is real or not.
I'm sorry, but as I've said in the past, I just can't risk a picture of her in here, for a number of reasons. Amongst them, well, while I know it may be the beatard way to give up pictures of naked girlfriends and sisters and MILFs and strangers and anything else that'll get them some attention, I just can't do that to her. Guess I'm just a bleeding cunt, you know.
Check him out for Alzheimer's. Moderate dementia sounds funny for the described actions compared to patient's background. Alzheimer's surfaces hard-written memories of highly intensive emotional fluxes from early days. Thus, his snapping about a Japanese girl with Pearl Harbor mentioned sounds more like the Alzheimer's diagnosed patients I have met, and as Alzheimer's also intensifies some reactions than centered on the mentioned events, it modulates the perception of reality, so to speak, so he actually feels closer to his memories than the current situation. Summing up, that's not anything close to KKK/neo-Nazis. He's probably closer to the emotional memories of his buddies dying from wartime events than natural perceptions of things they are now. Just clarifying, since I had been forcibly in quite the Alzheimer-related subject for the last several years. Just try to act out a sign for medical staff for prolonged Alzheimer-related observations. If it's positive, several medications might make the guy a little less inclined towards the past and thus less aggressive towards your one-armed ball of cuteness. And keep out of poisoning the bastard, lol. Right. It's just that I can't recall his exact diagnosis offhand, since he's not in my wing, and I thus don't have access to his file. I just went with dementia more as a layman's catch-all term for old person crazy, rather than going out on a limb with a specific Alzheimer declaration, since I'm not sure about it. But yes, his behavior has struck me as being more inclined that way based on some of my other patients, was just playing it safe. Of course, I'm not involved in his care, so I can't make any recommendations in that regard, and the other nurses said he'd been looked over more carefully after these incidents, aside from keeping him away from her. So, not a lot I can do, really. Okay, to this last barrage of demands for pics, thanks. I'll say what I've said before. It's not going to happen, and if that does somehow drive you to believe or disbelieve something, well, not much I can do about that. Besides, she's made it clear in the past that she doesn't enjoy or want her picture being taken, and doing so while she's asleep is a bit too much of a violation for me. Haha, violation, etc., etc. Considering the fake threads that were posted after Christmas, has there been any contact at all from her relatives yet? Yes, I saw that on the wiki. No, there still hasn't been anything from them yet. Appalling assholes that I consider them. Why not get her to play Go? Go is fun. Or make her watch Hikaru no Go. That'd be awesome. She could become the next Sai. Well, I don't play Go. And I don't know if anyone else in the home plays Go either. I suppose I could try it, though. Is Go appropriate for someone her age? Like, difficulty-wise? She's a damn smart kid, but I don't want to introduce something that'll annoy her one way or another. Even little kids play Go in Japan. She's a smart kid. She can easily learn from a beginner's book. It's too bad, though, that she can't play even on the internet. Well, give her a book or two and she'll be teaching you in no time. Okay, we'll see. I'll think about it, alright? I was more worried about not being able to put up a good challenge to her than her being able to get it, if you want the truth. Nurse-kun, I remember that you said that she had a Samus Aran sticker on her DS, so I suppose that she is a Metroid fan. If that's the case, then it must be really sad and frustrating for her not being able to play Metroid Prime Hunters. Yeah. She hasn't said anything about it, but it is amongst her pile of games that don't, as far as I know, get played anymore. I haven't brought it up yet, but then I haven't brought up her copy of Castlevania DOS, either. Playing Mario Kart together is hard enough. Sup, Nurse-kun? I finally get to see one of your threads. My question is, if you get legal permission of being Amputee's tutor, how are you going to tell her? I mean, we don't know if she would be pleased by the idea. Well, if the mentoring thing does get the A-OK, I'll bring it up to her as what it is. A choice for her to make. Whether she'd like the opportunity to get out of the facility and have some fun, do some things other than going to rehab and coming back. Basically, do something other than the routine, with me. If she doesn't want to, well, that'll be that, and I'll drop it, of course. I mean, it's hardly productive to force her to do something to make her happy, right? I've been thinking, get her some pizza and see if Lolly hate it. I've always been wondering about that one. I'll consider going out for pizza on the list, if the mentoring thing goes through. Bringing food into the home from outside is a no-no, though. You wouldn't happen to have the Wi-Fi friend code dealie for her Mario Kart DS, would you? No, I don't. The home isn't Wi-Fi equipped. Anyway, so she wouldn't be able to play with anyone from outside. Besides, if she got randomly buzzed by someone she doesn't know to play, it might not go very well, you know? Sorry, man. In response to the attached image, oh god, the awesome. New desktop found. NK here. Editorial note. No way to know who posted this. Wow, I made one of the threads. A few questions. If things go the way we are all hoping, are you planning on ever telling her you blog about her on the internet? On a related note, will you maybe show her the wiki? Speaking of computers, she will learn to use one eventually. Not everyone knows it, but there are WWII keyboards layouts specifically designed to be typed on by only one hand, different ones for left and right hands. Learning to type one-handed on QWERTY is probably more useful for portability's sake, but just thought I'd mention the one-handed WWII layouts, as WWII users myself. Last, any chance of setting up an anonymous contact email for us to message you on a more long-term basis? You rule!
Basically, my answer for now on all of those questions is maybe, we'll see, not sure. And yeah, I'm sure she'll learn to use one just fine. I mean, people type one-handed all the time, as I'm sure you all know, so it's just a question of just how well she does it.
Well, right, but there's a world of difference between typing one-handed for short-term convenience and doing it all the time. Try it sometime. I know that's a bit far in the future, but it was something I could contribute.
No, I wasn't trying to shoot you up. I'm just saying that, yeah, I'm sure she will learn to use one, and I was aware of one-handed keyboards, with someone having posted this picture in a previous thread. Sorry if it came off as dickish. Like I said before, I don't mind the actual story posts. What I do mind are the faggot posts showing stuff like caring, appreciation, praise, and using words like adore, awesome, and other puke-inducing remarks. Yes, because clearly, I would be using italics there if I could. These strange and terrible things will catch on in a big way in B, changing it into something completely unrecognizable to us forever, and turning it into what much of society would consider a positive force in the universe. Lol, psych, fig. One-armed ball of cuteness. Well, since she's closer to approaching a roughly spherical-ish set of limbs than the vast majority of humans, she might not, well, not just yet, anyway. Doesn't mean she isn't, though. Anyway, it's been a while now, and a hectic while at that, since I went through her family's things with her social worker. I was kind of focused on finding the DS and games in particular, and it was dark and we were rushed. She wanted to get home, having gone out there with me as her last task of the day, and it took her into overtime without extra pay. So I didn't really have the time to analyze her belongings when we finally found her boxes. I seem to recall that she had a stuffed lion in one box, but since we came for the DS in particular, I wasn't comfortable enough requesting to add it to the list, since I was kind of pushing it as it is. Any music or movies were packed with the rest of the family's media stuff, since most 7-year-olds don't keep those things in their own rooms, and I've mostly replaced her music collection via her new iPod. Anyway, and to be honest, my memory isn't really all that great anyway. Maybe I'll bring it up with her, but for now, that's all I can offer.
Nurse-kun, what season is Amputee-chan's birthday? I understand something as specific as a day or month would be violating privacy, but can you give us a ballpark figure?
Summer. A word of caution to Nurse-kun. Don't go too overboard with the weeaboo stuff, origami, go, etc. Yes, her heritage is half Japanese, but she was born here in the US. ? She may not have the full tendencies of all the mouth-breathing otaku here, but just keep it to a minimum. If you are going to encourage her with board games, start with checkers and then move up to the like. I know. I've borne that in mind, and it's not too hard to do so, since she speaks with a local accent, has the blonde hair, and is clearly a local girl too. Though, I admit that I'm not really sure how a Japanese girl would be different in that regard, since I've not really met one from Japan before. I like to think I'm not an otaku, or at least I'd be a self-loathing one if I were, though I don't really outright loathe them either. I mean, anyone that's a regular on 4chan can't really claim to be completely incompatible with them, or they'd be hanging out somewhere else. Rambling. Anyway, yeah, I know. The origami is the most Japanese thing I've introduced to her so far, and while the Go suggestion was a good one, as it's not a bad game and easily played one-handed between two people, I think I might try checkers and or chess first, simply because I know them better. Really, if I tried to go too Japanese on her, I'd just embarrass myself, since I don't even speak the language or anything. Even a local girl like her,
who can detect that stink of desperation, one would think.
So, Nurse-kun, what was the impetus that started this 4chan Iliad? Really, what possessed you to weave your epic tale of love, compassion, and no-legged lollies?
Well, the simple fact is that I didn't really have anyone else with whom I could talk about the situation in a frank manner. Amputee or Orphan or whatever specific sites don't quite have B's level of brutal honesty, and I might have just been kicked out or tracked up. 4chan's anonymity, we are not anonymous law, being another selling point. I took a gamble that there were at least a few anonymy on here that weren't total shitbags, since I don't think I am, and I'm on here, so, well, it turned out more positively than I thought it would, so I think it was for the best. Then it kind of snowballed from there, with interest levels I really wasn't anticipating, and, well, here we are. Hey Nurse-kun, I've got an idea if you're up for it. Perhaps for the purposes of preventing future hoax posts by the Anani out there looking to troll you, we could establish a way to determine that you are truly Nurse-kun, beyond post style. I think a picture of a distinctive object, something as unique as you can make it, with a post-it saying something like, "Hey guys, Nurse-kun here," would suffice. Then, in future posts, you can present pics of the same distinctive object with different message stickies. I'll consider this. I'm actually looking across the room at something that would suffice right now. Well, a rock would work. You can't have two rocks that ride the same. Well, what it is doesn't really matter, since I still don't have a digital camera medium, so it'll need to be developed, even if I do take one. Besides, it is kinda unfeasible without said digital medium for quick uploading, so it's never been my thing to consider that sort of thing before. Not sure I want to now. I'll think about it. We'd have to talk to Moot to give him some type of unique logon. I have no interest in having a trip code, just for the record. If I do decide to pick up a cheapo webcam or something, I may consider the aforementioned unique items method of identification, but that'd be about it.
Nurse-kun, look into knitting for her. I'm not sure how well she could manage, but she might be able to with the prosthetic thing. If all else wins, use fire. I mean, you could probably borrow a few origami books from a library or photocopy them. Does she like to draw? Or maybe you could get her some modeling clay to mess around with. That stuff is all fun. It seems she did like to draw, before the accident. Pretty talented too, as our friendly neighborhood shrink has some photocopies of pictures she did pre-accident, donated to her psych team at the hospital by her teachers. I'm not an art expert or anything, but I would have judged them done by something quite a bit older than her, and done well too. And all of it nice, happy, well-adjusted stuff, including pictures of her parents, which were realistic enough to give me a good idea of how they looked. Not so much since, though. The resident shrink has some copies of pictures she did as part of her therapy, and, well, it's some disturbing shit. And I say that as a B-tard. It was probably the most sick I felt in regards to her. Not because she grossed me out, but, well, I'm not going to sound like a pussy faggot assorted adjective nouns saying this, but it was the realization of just how badly she's been damaged, if the pictures are any indication of her psyche. Anyway, I'm not sure about knitting. Don't you need two hands with a decent finger control to do that? I guess I could look into it. And yeah, I've considered checking the local library for more origami books, though the website someone pointed me toward earlier has some good stuff in it too. I'll think about the clay too. Maybe needlepoint, if she's not a stabby risk. If she can use her prosthetic arm or hand to hold it, should be pretty easy. Probably wouldn't even need a thimble. Well, she's still considered risky enough that sharp objects would probably be ruled out by administrator/shrink. That might include knitting needles. Become a hero risky, or needles in angry vet's applesauce risky? Little of column A, little of column B. She's a stabbing risk? That is awesome. When are you going to introduce her to the beauty that is B? Or should you wait until she's a little older before coming here? I think she's probably cynical and jaded enough at this point to understand most of B's borderline misanthropic humor. Well, geez, man. If I let her on B, assuming I got her to a computer where it wasn't blocked in the first place, I'd get banned for underage posting if she said anything. More seriously, she's 7 years old, dude. B is not a place for 7-year-olds to be, already messed up or not. Perhaps especially not them. Less seriously, to follow up on the more serious point, if your cat could read and comprehend, would you let it read stuffonmycat.com after having posed it with a cat girl figurine on it while it was asleep? So, Nurse-kun, another question, and this time it's in complete digression from the Amputee-chan topic. How do you come to be a brother? It's not a very interesting story. A friend of mine linked some pictures from 4chan. I checked them out, looked into the whole 4chan thing, wound up in B. Found it amusing, kept checking back. The end. It's not exactly the mythic quest of the ages, you know. B weeps at stories of little girls whose lives have been ruined. B laughs at genocide, racism, sexism, CP, and every god-awful thing known to man. I don't know why, but B seems so brutally honest. B is humanity minus the self-deception. As I said, that's why I came to B with this in the first place. I mean, if anyone was going to tell me, lol, she's fucked, it would be B. Thus far, that remains a minority opinion. How does Amputee-chan take to books? Quite well. She's been reading relatively steadily since Christmas, when me and the family got her a whole box of them, and I'm considering talking to a librarian for advice on further items pretty soon, as she's been going through said box at a rapid pace. One can only play so much DS after all.
You know, if you adopt her, one day she will have hormones and she won't have many friends. You are going to be the manliest guy in her life by a serious amount. Sticking it in her pooper isn't too unrealistic.
I'm trying not to think about that too much, dude. But, at the same time, something I couldn't help thinking about, bad as it may be. Another question for B here, and give it to me straight. Would you be interested in a girl/woman missing 3 limbs and an eye, even if she used her arm prosthetic really well, covered up her leg prosthetics with stockings or something, and was good enough with them to walk or even run almost normally, was good enough with makeup to cover the scar over her eye? Excluding "God, stumps make me hard" answers from the sickos out there, asking the non-fetishist here. Would you be romantically interested in someone like her, with a great body that's still intact, and a more or less healed psyche and a fascinating mind? And not just romantically, but sexually as well? Think hard about this, B. And in particular, think back to when you were a teenager onward. Be honest with yourself before you answer. It's not something I enjoy thinking about, but it came up after someone posted a similar question in an earlier thread, and it occasionally pops back up in my brain. Stuff like this is part of why I came to be with her in the first place. Help me out here. Just for the record here, I'm not asking should I go for it. Question isn't about if it's okay for me to feel that way. It's a solicitation of thoughts from others on a hypothetical girl in her situation when they're of age, or at least a teenager with you being of the same age as her, etc. Well, I'll say this much. We're not in the ass crack of America, and you can take from that what you will. We aren't in one of the cosmopolitan centers, but we aren't in Podunkville either. Still, I'd say that people are no better or worse than anywhere else, really. And with that, all the good and bad things that suggests. She has a glass eye, so she does look like she has 2 eyes. Still, except for really up close, maybe. Nurse-kun finally sees Mechalolly. I'd just like to take this opportunity to say, sir, madam, that your artistic contributions have outright made my day and put a smile on my face. And I'd like to thank you for it. You, sir, madam, are WinRAR, and I will be using that picture to launch the next thread. Nurse-kun, this is my 3rd time in one of your threads. Heart, I've got a question for you. Do you keep any sort of online journal? LJ, GJ, DJ, Zanga, etc. It'd be a great place to post your epic recollections of the day in, and for some anonymite to reply directly. If it's an anonymity issue, there's always proxies. Never been my style, I must admit. I mean, I always sort of saw them as the refuge of those that are desperately seeking a way to make the world recognize their awesomeness that everyone they met up close seemed to miss. Or at least cyber cocksuckings. No offense intended, of course, and I'm aware there are plenty who'd say I'm doing the same thing here.
Seconded. Any clues to your identity will be exploited, and once they have it, even if most people use it for good, someone will find your workplace and call you out for what you probably aren't. Even after you adopt her, if it happens, a donation drive to help you with expenses would probably work out pretty well. Unfortunately, the local child services would be spammed with messages quoting the third paragraph of your first post ever.
Yeah, I know. I never anticipated it growing into this, so the whole "watch what you say on the intranets" voice wasn't speaking to me at the time. I mean, shit. I didn't even know there was a 4chan wiki before all this, let alone that it all wind up archived on one.